Good morning and welcome to this Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Alex Hall. I am Vice Chairman of this committee and I'll be your Chairman for this meeting. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and with this in mind I would like to welcome members of the public watching this live. I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, we will need to leave the chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park until further instructions are issued. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of this meeting. If you wish to ask a question at any point, can you please raise your hand? And can I also remind members of the committee to switch on your microphone when invited to speak and to speak close to the microphone and switch it off when finished. Requests to speak will be collated by the Scrutiny Officer, Chiara. We will now move on to the formal agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. I believe Councillor Strengle has sent his apologies, and Councillor Ashton is here to replace Councillor Wright. Yeah, that's correct. Is there any other apologies, Robert?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Do any members wish to declare any interest? No. Minutes of the meeting of the 22nd of January 2022. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a true and correct record. Please turn to pages 5 to 12 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer? Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. There's just one amendment that I'd like to ask for, please, Chair. To ask that the point that was made asking the A7 under the local transport plan LTP5 discussed at the last meeting prior to it going to full council, we did ask, or I asked, if pointed out that the A17 had been omitted under the list of major roads in section 3, I think it was, and I did ask for that to be included in that list, and it was agreed that it would be. And indeed, when the final LTP5 document went to full council, it was included. So the action had been taken away from this committee and dealt with, but that point hasn't been made now minutes. And I did see in some publication online over the weekend that it was being quoted that the A17 hadn't been included in the list of major roads, and obviously they were referring to the draft document, not the final document that went to full council. So I think it's important that that point is captured in our minutes, that it was pointed out at this committee that that A17 hadn't been included in those lists. It had just been missed, really, I think. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brooks. Your comments have been captured.
Thank you.
Councillor Austin.
Chairman, am I being silly, or it isn't impossible, but was Councillor Rawlins both present and having submitted her apologies?
Okay. Yeah, okay, it's just an error, but thank you for raising that. Do I have a proposal? Yeah, Councillor Dyer.
I propose as amended, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Okay, thank you, Councillor Austin. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I think that's unanimous, but just, is there any vote against or abstaining? No, that's, thank you. Those minutes are agreed. Thank you. So, item 4. Announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. Chairman, we have a busy agenda this morning with 2 pre-decision items to be taken. Can I please stress the importance of succinct questions and contributions to all? Thank you. Executive Councillor announcements. Are there any announcements from Councillor Richard Davis, Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT, or Councillor Cleo Powelton-Williams, Support Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT?
There are no announcements, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Senior officers, before I ask about any officer announcements from Karen Kassar, Assistant Director for Highways, I would like to welcome and introduce to members Jonathan Evans, who has been appointed as the Head of Highways, Client and Contractual Management Services, and thank Tom Gifford, Client and Contract Manager, for his support to this committee until now. Karen, we are now over to you if you have any announcements to make. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to inform you that we've got Richard Fennick on the call today, who was also appointed to the Head of Highways, Asset and Local Management Services. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We now move on to item 5 of the agenda, the North Highcombe Relief Road. This is a pre-decision scrutiny item and can be found on pages 13 to 28 of the agenda pack. This item invites the committee to consider and comment on the North Highcombe Relief Road project. The report seeks for approval from the executive to enter into a 2-stage design and build contract for the purpose of delivering the project. Our views will be collated by the scrutiny officer, Chiara, and will be reported to the executive as part of its decision on this matter on the 5th of April. The report will be presented by Sam Edwards, Head of Highways and Infrastructure. In terms of actions, the committee is invited to consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendations to the executive as set out on pages 15 and 16 of the report, and to agree any additional comments to be passed on to the executive in relation to this item. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning all. So I've taken the paper as read, and I just wanted to pick out a few key elements of it. So the first part is about what the decision today is about, or the recommendations for the decision is about, entering into a design and build contract. Just to summarise that, so going back a year or so when we were successful with a £110 million bid from the DFT, we then started to look at how we would choose to deliver this strategic road. What the council wanted was greater cost certainty than what we've had on previous large-scale schemes of this nature. So we went out to the market to contractors, consultants and other clients across the country, as in other local authorities. And it was overwhelming evidence that the design and build form of contract gives that greater cost certainty. So that was where we set off in that direction. We've proposing to enter into through the SCAPE framework with Balfour Beatty as the supplier. And just to confirm, so in previous large-scale schemes like this, say for example the Eastern Bypass or the Grantham Southern Relief Road, where the client, as in the county, procures the consultant to do the design and the planning and other elements of that, and then later they procure the contractor to do the building. This moves away from that direction. Instead, at this early stage, we commission the contractor, who then commissions their consultant to do the design, so we don't have a contractual nature with the consultant. Moving on to the next phase, the next element of the report I want to highlight is about the cost estimates. Now, at the outline business case, when that was submitted, it was broadly £155 million. We are now looking at a mid-range cost of £193 million, so a significant increase, which I'll come on to in a moment. What I would stress is within 1.5.1 of the paper, there's a range of likely cost, with the low range at 179 being taken from the base cost. If all the most likely opportunities occur and none of the most likely risks occur, you would end up at that lower figure. And then the high figure is if all the most likely risks occur and none of the most likely opportunities occur, you'd end up at the high range. That range is quite robust, but what it can't account for is significant things that you wouldn't factor in a most likely scenario. The third element I'll come on to is under 1.5.4, is really just to summarise that change. As it shows, the OBC, the outline business case value estimate, was 155 million, and that shows at a low range a 16% increase, the higher range a 37% increase, and a median range a 25% increase. If we take the median range, or the most likely figure that we're projecting, 25% is not something that anyone's particularly happy about, rather funders, county, or anyone else. But what I would say is it's very reflective of what's happened in the construction industry and the market since the outline business case was put together. And that broadly aligns with material price inflation across the country and further. Finally, I just want to touch on what's in 1.4.10 of the report, is just to identify that this is a key decision to enter into or looking recommendations for a key decision to enter into contract. But there are various clauses, X22 clauses within the contract, that at certain milestones throughout the project, the county can terminate that contract with no further costs or liabilities to it. Equally, we will be coming back to the scrutiny and back to the executive for 3 further key decisions later on in the project. The next one will be in advance of submitting the planning application. The one after that will be in advance of submitting the legal orders, so that's the compulsory purchase orders and the sideways orders. And then finally is to gain key decision approval to enter into the construction contract. So although this key decision we're seeking is to enter into contract, we will come back for constitutional key decisions to move any further within that contract. And I think at that point, Chairman, I'll pause and ask for any questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Rawlins.
Just on the costing, Sam, obviously, we're in a period of very high inflation, oil price rise, all these things. What level of inflation expectation have we got in there? Because it's likely to be somewhat under pressure, one suspects.
Thank you. Yes, it is under pressure. The inflation is a concern. What's factored into these costs, and what broadly is one of the most contributing factors for the increase, is the spike that we've seen in the last 18 months. The National Construction indication it has already started to settle out a little bit. It will likely stabilise, and that doesn't mean it will stop. It will increase at normal constant construction inflation, which does tend to be higher than background RPI, but it will stabilise around May. And that's what these prices are based on. However, within that range, the high range does account for levels of further inflation on top of background normal construction inflation. If we have a similar scenario that's happened in the last 18 months, elements of that could not be included, because we could, but where do you draw the line? So like I say at the start, we have factored in the most likely risks, but if we see a 25% spike in, say, 2 years' time, as we've seen now, only elements of that spike will be included in the high range.
And if that spike got to an unmanageable stage, it was untenable, would that then trigger some of the clauses that you mentioned a few moments ago?
Absolutely. If it becomes untenable for the council, we will report back on the facts and the evidence to this committee and to others. And if at a time the council decides that this scheme is no longer viable to take forward, whatever the reasonings, then there are provisions within the contract, both within the X22 from a contractual perspective, and obviously we will have set milestones within constitutional key decisions to make that decision. So again, to stress, we are not at this stage committing to the full 193 forecast expenditure payment at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Sam, whilst accepting the benefits of this project, I would question the benefits that it will actually bring to the City of Lincoln, because all the benefits gained once you get to Lincoln will be lost. An example is the latest planning application. I think the term of overprescribed for Skellingthorpe Road was used, but I can't see nothing actually happening in Lincoln to, you know, coordinate both the road and this. Dixon Street is a complete standstill, but the main question is on finance. Now, when I was reading the papers, you got 1.211, very likely to offer a high value for money. But then on 1.43, furthermore, internal estimate costs are likely to be higher. It goes on lower risk and higher cost, certainly, than the procurement routes used by LCC. Like the last speaker, what is the stage where the council say, you know, we're paying this to you, that's it, no more? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take those in turn. So the benefits, I can certainly go away and look at individual roads, like Skellingthorpe or Dixon Street, and I'm not suggesting that there will be that granular level of detail to say that, but there is within the traffic model the ability to test those scenarios, which has happened in this bid, and I can certainly go away and look at individual roads about what that impact is. As far as benefits of a scheme of this strategic nature, there are a lot of benefits that are factored into that. So part of it is about improving the agri-food industry connections, about providing resilience to the highway network, which in Lincoln it does currently struggle, about options of that that east-west and north-south connection. It also improves journey time reliability for benefits, which goes into the benefit cost ratio and the value for money assessment within the Green Book basis. I should also stress that the benefits of the scheme have been scrutinised by central government for almost a year through the outline business case process. So the benefits are justified. They are within the original outline business case summary. They are very clear. It may not be down to the individual roads, but it's about looking at the holistic nature. The other thing I would highlight, which I think is really key, is about what this unlocks. It unlocks growth, it unlocks housing development as part of the Central Lincolnshire Local Plan, and also crucially unlocks what's in the Lincoln Transport Strategy, which is the ability to start looking more favourably towards sustainable travel patterns and how we actually factor that into the future, which again is included in the Lincoln Transport Strategy. But happy to provide details outside of this committee about the details of the benefits. Moving on to the costs. The point of when it becomes untenable is not a decision for me as an officer to make. It will be me to come back to this committee and others to inform about where those costs are going. What is clear and been evidence is that the Department for Transport are not going to increase their financial offer for what they have now. So any cost overrun would have to be factored in through other forms of funding, whether that's the councils putting funding or other funding bids that we could explore. But it's really not down to me to determine when it's untenable or not. As far as benefit to cost ratio, I can go into the details with you outside about how we go through those, but it follows what's called the Green Book basis of the business case that goes through the strategic outline business case, and then finally the FBC, the final business case, which was programmed for 2025 with the DFT. So as the scheme progresses, costs will certainly change. It will fluctuate within the range, as will the benefits of what we can glean out of it as the detail of the scheme gets more generated. And that's that final document that's called the final business case that goes for the DFT that summarises all of that.
Thank you. Councillor Dyer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And this project couldn't come soon enough. It massively impacts my division of Waddington and Highcombe East. It goes through the centre of my division, and it is certainly a game changer for North Highcombe, Waddington, and even south of Lincoln, but the whole of the Greater Lincoln area. So I really do welcome this report coming to committee. And as I say, it cannot come soon enough because of the congestion that my residents are facing on a daily basis. I'm particularly pleased that it's been confirmed that this will be a dual carriageway road. I think some residents were disappointed that the Eastern Bypass wasn't dual carriageway. They're really pleased to see that this is dual carriageway. And also as well, I'm pleased to see the cycling provision within this road as well. Sam, and I'm very grateful for your time that you've spent with me since my election last year to go through it in great detail. Just some comments, stroke questions, if I may, Chairman. I did ask some residents what if they had any questions that they'd like me to put at committee, so here I am. What nature and conservation measures are being taken out before and during construction of the North Hycombe Relief Road? And further to that, what archaeological investigations are being carried out as well? And are we expecting to find anything of interest within that area of land? Residents have also expressed concerns with me in respect to Somerton Gate Lane and how that will be closed off, and particularly speaking how Somerton Gate Lane, the only access that will be available for that road that will be left once the bypass is constructed is particularly difficult to navigate during winter months. So that's just a concern that's been put to me by residents. But within this report, I just want you to clarify how will the County Council and the developers ensure that this development, through every stage of the development, will be clearly communicated to residents and so that they're aware of any disruption as it comes forward. I think so far so good. The County Council have already written to residents in affected areas. But will this be continuing, especially as we move on to road closures further down the line? Within the report, 1.4.8, the notice to proceed, do you have any expectation of when that will be coming to councillors for a decision? And within the report, you also identify a November 2025 commencement. Is there any indication where the construction will start? Obviously, it will start along the route of the North Hycombe Relief Road, but I'm just curious to know at this stage, is there any idea whether we start from the Bracebridge Heath side or the Hycombe side, or is that yet to be decided? And finally, Chairman, 1.7.3, the funding gap that's highlighted there. Is there any indication of how this will be addressed? Sam, in your answer to Councillor Clark, you indicated that we won't get any more funding from DFT, so I'll assume that that's for the County Council to find that additional funding. But overall, Chairman, it's a very, very positive scheme. I'm very excited to see this develop. Thank you.
Okay, I think there were 9 questions, and I'll go through them in order if I got them, but please correct me if I don't catch them. So the first one was about nature and conservation. That is really about what this next step is now. So if the key decision is taken as recommended, we will appoint Balfour Beatty as the design and build contractor, who will then appoint their consultant. The consultant's job, part of this, broadly over the next year, is to do data capture, environmental surveys, ecology surveys, as well as preliminary design that all feed into the next major milestone, which is to submit a planning application. As part of that planning application, there'll be an EIA, an environmental impact assessment, which is a legal requirement and a statutory requirement to do that. That is a very lengthy document and a very lengthy process to go through that looks at all of the fauna, the ecology, noise, pollution, emissions, and various other things, and needs to show a level of mitigation through that process. So to sort of summarise that, yes, those things will be taken into account. I'm not going to promise at any stage that it will be to the liking of every individual, but it will be in line with the planning requirements that are taking place. And what we will review with the board is how much further this county might want to do above and beyond what is its statutory requirements to do. But like most things, that would come with a cost. Next one, archaeology. We've had a number of discussions with our internal heritage team about what we're likely to find. That likeliness is factored into those cost ranges. The next process is doing, like I say, in the next year is what's called the archaeological screening, where you set a screen of what you would investigate, of what you're likely to find. The actual digging won't happen until the scheme starts in 25 because we need the land in place before we do so. But through that process, you get a very good idea of what you are likely to find. And just to summarise, that is mostly going to be around the A607, the Grantham Road, and in the Witham Valley. early indications is they're not likely to be as significant as they were at the Eastern Bypass. But like I say, we haven't done that screening yet, but we've factored the prices with a plus and a minus on what data we've been given so far from the Heritage team. Somerton Gate Lane is not one I'm going to be able to answer today. That is one of the key things we're looking into about the detail of what you do with the roads when they comes through. There's a number of options from stopping the road up, but obviously there are allotments, there's housing, there's businesses that access through there. And as part of the scheme with the side roads, we're required to maintain access or reasonable access. And if not, there's injurious affection and cost and liabilities for those that we can't. And that would get reviewed at the public inquiry if there was one. So I don't have the answer right now. That will come in more in the data capture and the preliminary design and the detailed design about how we do that. But that won't be done in isolation with the landowners. That will be very much done with the landowners and the tenants about how they perceive the access. And, for example, do they need to access from this road, or would they rather access from somewhere else? There's that more iterative conversation to go through with the landowners. As far as communication with council and developers, one thing to stress on, this is a council-led scheme. There is development attached to it, but that will come latter, the scheme. It is a council-led scheme as a strategic road. As far as comms, as you say, Councillor Dyer, we've communicated with landowners, the majority, if not all, the landowners. We've had a number of discussions with a lot of people. We've had public events. There's a comms strategy that's been drafted, and there's newsletters, emails. There's a website. So we're very, very keen to get the message out to the general public about progress of the scheme, and more sensitively with those of the landowners that will have some impact or throughout. So we're very keen to manage that and be sensitive and professional in the way we do that. There's one about communication with road closures. Yeah, that will come much nearer the time and be very sort of reactive. But we'll be setting plans on the website as what we plan to do in advance. So it won't be sort of, by the way, 2 days' time we're going to shut the A6 zone. It'll be very planned out, but I can't give any more details. That's nearer to construction. The notice to proceed in 1.4.8, that's in relation to entering into the construction contract. So obviously we will come back to this committee and then the executive for a key decision to do so. That will most likely be just in advance of starting in November 2025. Because in advance of that, we need to submit the final business case and get that approved, which we can't do until we have the land in our ownership. So everything's sort of linked back to the inquiry, which is linked back to the planning. So there's a very sort of clear programme that goes through. When will it start? November 25. The form of what it starts too early to state. The contractor might choose to have a soft start and spend 6 months and get all the archaeology work done first, and maybe all the utility diversion, so they can approach the scheme after that. They may do it in tandem. It's too early at this stage, but that's some of the benefit of going through a design and build, that we can have those discussions early and say 23, 24, rather than awarding the contract and then sort of working out how you do it. So you actually design it into your design process in the first place, rather than here's a design, make it work. So that's the benefits of this process. Where will it start? Like I say, I'm not sure about the phasing. What I will say is it's very unlikely to start at one end. Well, it won't start at one end and work through to the other, because the strategy behind the scheme will be it's an earthworks moving scheme because of the big cut. Just like the Eastern Bypass, you've got the cutting of the material going through the edge, and then you've got embankments that will come in towards the west, towards Highcombe. So you need to move the earth in a managed fashion. So you'll actually start the scheme across the whole length, and it will open across the whole length. We won't be opening it up in sections or starting in sections. It will happen throughout. For example, we will likely do the topsoil strip across the whole thing first, store it, and then move on from there. And I think the final one, probably the most difficult one for me at least, is about the funding gap. There is a funding gap that's projected at the moment. As I say, the DFT at this stage are saying that they won't put any more funding towards it, and it's not really one that I can answer about where we fill that gap. I think there may be some conversations about the authority, the council, filling that gap, but I must say we will continue to look for other funding opportunities that come through this. But yeah, this is the information that we're expecting it to, and it will need funding at a later date. But that's the thing to stress: it's at a later date, not right now. There's certainly funding in place to take us well up to the construction and a good way through it.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is also about funding, and I appreciate you may not be able to answer us. £38 million from Lincolnshire County Council. Well, I don't begrudge North Highcombe this road. I know what their long road is like currently, but they seem to have got it in relatively short space of time compared with some places elsewhere in the county. Is £38 million a sort of average sort of figure that the county would put in to a scheme like this? Although I've been on this council for quite some time, I'm new to this committee, so I haven't had these sort of details to think about before. So what makes LCC decide how much money they are going to provide? And is it a case of where you happen to be or who you happen to be? I'd be interested to know what determines this sort of figure.
I'm afraid you were right the first one, that it's not one I'm going to be able to answer. It's not an officer to decide where we invest or not. We just present the facts.
Could my question therefore, Chiara, be passed to the portfolio holder who isn't here this morning, please, or anyone else perhaps involved on the financial side of the county who could answer that for me?
Absolutely, Councillor Austin, recorded and will be put forward. Someone wants to come in. Councillor Perrotton-Williams would like to come in.
Okay, Councillor Perrotton-Williams.
Sorry, Chairman, I unmuted my microphone before I actually took the video off, and as you can hear, I've got a crying baby in the background. I was just going to tell Councillor Austin that I will speak to Councillor Davis about your question.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any further questions? No? Okay, thank you everyone for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item, and I move that the committee endorses this report and recommendations are set out on pages 15 and 16 of the report, and that our comments as captured are shared with the executive for its decision on this item on the 5th of April 2022. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dyer, thank you. We will now have a vote, so all those in favour, please raise your hands. I think that's unanimous, isn't it? Marvellous. I will just say, those against, any abstentions? No, marvellous. Item 6 of the agenda now, adoption and implementation of the Advanced Payment Code Exemptions Policy. This is our second pre-decision scrutiny item for the day. The report was shared as a supplementary item on the 28th of February. The committee is invited to consider and comment on a proposal which seeks approval to adopt and implement an Advanced Payment Code Exemptions Policy where a development site meets specified criteria. The decision is being taken by the Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT between the 14th and 18th of March 2022. The item will be presented by Liz Burnley, County Manager for Development on Teams. Before we proceed with the presentation, I would like to make you aware that I have been informed of an amendment to the paper pack we received and will consider. If I may take you to ask you to turn to page 13 of the supplementary pack at Appendix A, Section A. It is stated that if the proposed development comprises only dwellings and serves 10 or less dwellings in total. This should be revised to if a proposed development comprises only dwellings and serves less than 10 dwellings in total. Papers have already been amended to reflect this change. In terms of our actions, the committee is invited to consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendations to the Executive Councillor as these are set out on page 5 of the report, and to agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive in relation to this item. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for highlighting those amendments. Good morning, all. Yes, LCC has been operating an APC process in some form for around 15 years now. The APC Act does form part of the Highways Act 1980, but is very, very dated, and some of the clauses actually date back now to 1951. The government have been proposing to update the Act for some time now, but at the moment haven't got round to doing that. So as a result of that, the Act's often open to interpretation, and there's very little case law to evidence that local authorities have been successful when enforcing the Act in court. So as a result of that, we have been applying for a number of years exemptions that are listed in Appendix A. The only thing we're proposing to do here is change the first section. Previously, we've applied the Act to 5 properties or less, and we would like to change that to less than 10 properties. And the reason for that is under the Floods and Water Management Act, the lead local flood authority as statutory consultees have got an obligation to comment on all major applications, so that's 10 properties or more. Anything less than 10 is dealt with by the local planning authority through building regs. So those details would still be checked and signed off at planning stage, but it would be by the local planning authority rather than ourselves. So at the moment, the two processes are in conflict with each other. So the proposal to change the exemption policy to less than 10 is to bring us in line with the Floods and Water Management Act. And that really is the only amendment. Everything else will stay the same. Property owners are informed during their local land charge searches when they buy a property of their responsibilities in respect of estate roads. So they will know if they're responsible for maintaining the estate. So there won't be any surprises when this comes forward. And that's it, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, so right, so I move that Councillor Brooks.
Just for clarity, Chairman, this is really documenting what we've been doing in practice for some while now, isn't it? Because so I'm just reinforcing that point. Really, it's something that this is the way we have been acting, but we hadn't actually got the policy written down. That's correct, is it?
Absolutely, Councillor Brooks, that's right. But we had been applying it to 5 properties or less previously, so that is the only change. Other exemptions remain the same.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. So I move that the committee endorses this report and recommendations as set out on page 5 of the supplementary report pack, with a caveat that the changes identified are incorporated to the report, and that our comments, well, we don't have any comments, do we? So, do I have a seconder? Councillor Dyer, thank you. All those in favour, thank you. That is agreed unanimously. So, moving on to item 7 of the agenda, Road Safety Partnership Annual Report. This item is on pages 29 to 70 of the agenda pack and invites us to consider and comment on the annual report, which provides an update on fatal and on killed and serious injury casualty figures for Lincolnshire. The item will be presented by Steve Batchelor, Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership Senior Manager, and we are invited to consider and comment on the report and highlight any recommendations or further actions required, and to seek assurance on the work being undertaken by the Road Safety Partnership to reduce the number of people killed and injured on county roads. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. As always, there's quite a lot of information and data contained within the report and the supplementary data document, so I don't intend to go through it all line by line. I'll try and take out what I feel are the key points, and then I'm happy to answer any questions on anything else that's they might arise. I'd also like to take the opportunity to say thank you for allowing us to do this presentation now in March instead of October, where we'd previously done that. What that's allowed us to do is to bring you right up to date with the local information and local data in terms of the number of people killed and seriously injured. Previously doing it in October meant that you were getting half a year's worth of data. Now you're getting all of 2020 and 21 in this report, which I think makes sure that you're far more informed than you would have otherwise been previously. Just to note that there is still a delay between our data and making comparisons on a regional and a national level, and that's because all the information needs to be sent to the Department for Transport, who collates all of the data for the UK and then sends it back out, and it will probably be around September this year that we get 2021's data, so we will present that at the next report. I'll start by looking at page 31 in your pack, and just to note that, of course, as I outlined at the last report, the coronavirus pandemic has had an impact in terms of the roads and in terms of collision casualties, and it does make it very difficult for us to make a direct comparison with previous years, although we'll endeavour to do so as best we possibly can. At 3.6 on page 31, I note that the number of people killed and seriously injured in 2021 was 452. That compares to 446 in 2020. Now, we saw a reduction in 2020 due to the amount of lockdowns and the number of people using the roads diminishing compared to previous years. So I'm pleased to note that that reduction has been sustained into 2021 with only a couple of figures different. On page 33, a couple of the key points that I'd like to highlight. In the supplementary data review, we do a comparison, and it's a 10-year comparison of, for example, 2008 with 2018. And a couple of reports ago, we were showing a 67.6% increase in the number of people killed and seriously injured in Lincolnshire. But at the last one, we were showing an 8.25% reduction, which was only just below the Great Britain figure of 13.83. Now, of course, that still means there's a great deal of work to be done within Lincolnshire, but it does demonstrate that we're in a much better position than we were a couple of years ago. 2020 saw reductions in most of the killed and seriously injured casualty categories when we split them down into user group, and as you'll be aware, we do that to try and highlight some of the vulnerable road user groups and look for commonality in the types of causation factors and what we might do to try and prevent them from occurring. The highest reductions that we saw was in the 0 to 16-year-old category in 2020, which was a 35.1% reduction, 31.9% reduction in pedestrian casualties, and a 25.9% reduction in car and taxi drivers. So that was all really positive. And as I say, very hard to distinguish how much of that was due to lockdowns and COVID occurring. But we'd have to, I think, assume that it was relatively significant in amongst that. Now, whilst the overall reduction in casualties was maintained in 2021, we have seen a few key increases and things that we'll need to focus on going forwards. The first one is particularly the child 0 to 16 category. Now, we saw an 87% increase. Now, that is going to be because those children are now out and about more, they're in vehicles with their parents more, but also, of course, commuting to school. It is within the range of what it was pre-lockdown, so it doesn't concern me as much as it would have done otherwise when you see that kind of increase, but it's certainly something that we need to be conscious of. And similarly, it's 19.1% increase in 2021 on the previous year for pedestrians, and I would suggest it's for similar causation factors and reasons that I just outlined with the 0 to 16s. Some of the other key information outlined in the data documents were that, as is often the case in terms of fatalities in Lincolnshire, they were predominantly male, with 82% of fatalities being male. 63% of them were in the 25 to 59 age range, and you might accurately look at that and say, well, that's a very big range. But the reason we do that is because we have vulnerable road users at either side. So either children, young and new and inexperienced drivers, and mature drivers. And the fact that the significant majority is in that middle range is probably what we would expect to see based on the population. 82% of fatalities were either a driver or a rider, motorcycle rider, in 2021. 92% happen in fine weather without high winds. I say this every time, but it always not surprises me, but I think I would expect adverse weather to play more of a significant result in the fatal collisions, but 92% were fine without high winds. 78% occurred within a car, and 67% occurred on A and B class roads. The highest contributory factor, as defined by the Stats 19 data presented by police officers, was careless, reckless, and in a hurry. I'll now move on to some of the key work that the Road Safety Partnership has done over the last 2 years, and just highlight some of the new work or changes in what we've had to do over this time period. Just to clarify for those that might not be aware, the Road Safety Partnership, which was formed in June 2020, is currently comprised of the following members. It's the Police and Crime Commissioners for Lincolnshire, Lincolnshire Police, Lincolnshire County Council, National Highways, Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue, and the East Midlands Ambulance Service. As a partnership, we also work closely with other partners, including the NHS, military camps, motoring organisations, schools, academies, colleges, universities, road safety organisations, and cycling and walking groups. Our priorities, as defined by the Strategic Board of the Road Safety Partnership for 2021, were young drivers aged 17 to 24 years, mature drivers over the age of 60, and my apologies if any of you are in those categories and do not consider yourself as mature drivers, two-wheel motor vehicle users, pedal cyclists, pedestrians, and also business users. For anyone who wishes to see, then the Road Safety Partnership strategy can be found on the Lincolnshire County Council website, which outlines our mission statement, vision, strategic priorities, and the outcomes of the work that we are doing. So in terms of some of the key work that we've done in 2020 and 2021, we continue to deliver our accident investigation and prevention engineering works. So over 1,000 sites throughout the county are looked at the highest level, assessed every year, and then we refine that down to approximately 40 where we feel that there's an emerging trend or there's a cluster of collisions that needs further work and investigation. Under the enforcement element of the work that we do, we continue to manage the operation of the safety cameras or speed camera network that we have in the county. We currently have 7 average speed camera systems, 39 static cameras, and approximately 80 to 100 mobile camera sites. But of course, that number does change over time. The static cameras that we have are still going through the digital upgrade program that I've referred to in previous reports. One thing that I'd like to highlight, which I think is really positive, is that we're seeing an increase, an uplift in the number of police officers within Lincolnshire Police dedicated specifically to roads policing within this county. We are working very closely with that team to ensure that we provide data so that their work can be targeted and therefore as effective as possible. We've also introduced a data analyst on the police side of the business, and what that allows us to do is firstly link more closely into the other areas of police enforcement business, but also look at other data sources, so much more about the types of offence data that's out there, and so we can build a better picture of where our work needs to be targeted. One of the things that's been introduced over the last year and a half was Operation Snap. This, which had been done in other areas throughout the country, enables the submission of dashcam video evidence from members of the public in relation to suspected driving offences. So up to the end of November 2021, we'd received 774 submissions. And that resulted in 236 suspected offences being processed and an additional 287 warning letters being issued. One of the points I want to make on Operation Snap, because it's one concern that's been raised to me sometimes, is that it might be a question of looking at low-hanging fruit. And I really want to make it clear that the process for SNAP is these are offences that are endangering other people, that are occurring, that other people would have got away with simply by the fact that a police officer had not witnessed it. And what we do to ensure consistency and to ensure it meets a good standard is that we've got a very experienced ex-police sergeant, who's now a police staff member, who applies the same logic as if he had seen that offence on the side of the road. What action would he have taken? And then we make sure that that would have met the criteria as outlined by the CPS for a prosecution to likely occur. And that means that we're only focusing on those types of offences that really require some sort of action. But one of the things I'm most pleased about, and isn't done in a lot of other areas, is this idea of warning letters. So it might be that something about the evidence that's been submitted that doesn't quite meet the standard. It might be very difficult to prove certain elements, but we like to warn people that are the subject of those videos that somebody felt strongly enough about their driving on the day that they uploaded their video, they filled in a witness statement and were prepared to go to court. So even if we're not able to take that forward as an offence, that something has been done, and it's just made that person a little bit more aware of why we're doing the scheme and that we're trying to focus on safety. A couple of the highest levels of offences that we process are driving a motor vehicle with failing to comply with red lights, lane closure signals, and driving a mechanically propelled vehicle on a road in a public space without due care and attention and failing to comply with a stop sign. So all of those are really quite important offences you would expect us to do something with. On page 37, I outline the Community Speedwatch scheme. I'm really pleased to say that we're now up to 270 members of the Community Speedwatch scheme in its widest form, which can include the use of passive speed limiter signs, vehicle activated speed signs, and also the volunteer speed monitoring group. And as to that third element, we've now got 77 trained groups throughout the county, which consists of 914 volunteers, and that's 428 locations throughout the county where they can monitor speed. From that, we've issued 25,000 warning letters again to motorists. So whilst there is no punitive element of this scheme, it is again highlighting to people that communities are concerned and communities are taking action to try and warn people about speeds in their communities and trying to improve safety. So again, a really positive contribution being made by the people of Lincolnshire. On to education at 6.8, we continue to deliver the National Driver Offender Retraining Scheme courses from the Road Safety Partnership. I'm really pleased to say that we've reintroduced the National Bike Safe Motorcycle Training course on top of the other motorcycle training course suites that we have. And we've got a biker breakfast event occurring in April, which I think will kickstart our efforts to try and reduce the number of people killed and injured on motorcycles throughout 2022. We continue to operate our Too Fast, Too Soon theatre productions within schools and colleges, and we've extended that out to corporate training over the last couple of years, trying to get a handle on managing operational road risk and reducing death and injury in people who are driving for work. We continue to manage the school crossing patrol facilities throughout the county and making a lot of efforts to try and ensure that we fill vacancies where they arise. It's one of the ones we have a lot of difficulty with because the nature of the work that's being done means it's 2 short periods of time per day. And very often we rely on people who live local to that community to be available and to apply. So we're putting a lot of effort into trying to find other ways of recruiting locally as opposed to just relying on the internet-based services that we would usually do. We continue to put a lot of information out with regards to communicating on key issues such as drink and drug driving, motorcycle safety, winter driving, seatbelts, child safety, for example. And in terms of schools and colleges, we're looking at all of the packages that we provide, whether through the Stay Safe Partnership or through the direct lessons we do into schools, looking at where we can introduce teacher-led activity as well, which extends the impact that we can have into schools. We're also looking at trying to provide digital content wherever available as well, so that again, it's not reliant upon somebody having to go into those schools. And of course, the last experiences of the last year and a half has kind of led us to try and make sure we've got more tools in the toolbox when it comes to education. So at primary level, we continue to try and get children to think about how to keep themselves and others safe now and in the future. the road environment and how it functions, and how to influence change in that environment. And then when we step up to secondary school, it's about understanding and recognizing unsafe situations, developing coping strategies and techniques to stay safe on the road, and promoting positive related behaviour amongst peers and discouraging negative peer pressure. And it's very much about ensuring that people understand that as they go into secondaries, there's a lot more independence, a lot more freedom, and it's about making good choices as much as anything else. So finally, from me, I'll just have a quick update on the coronavirus impact overall that I've touched on a few times. So to date, the partnership has delivered over 30,000 online courses for people that have committed road traffic violations. These are a digital course that wasn't even available in March 2020. The school crossing patrol facilities have been on and off quite a bit over the last year and a half, but have for some time now, since September last year, been fully back into service. Similarly with Community Speedwatch and our other training and Too Fast Too Soon schemes, having to stop at various points, but all back up and running and working well now. Everything else within the partnership, such as the collision investigation team, the enforcement teams, and the accident investigation and prevention, have all been occurring as they would have done otherwise. So I think that's all I'm going to do in terms of updates from the report, and I'm now happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the comprehensive and detailed report. I think just a couple of takeaways from that I didn't know before I read this report was that the majority of incidents occur in fine weather and the time of day as well. I would have expected more to have been at night. So they were two interesting statistics I got from that. But just two questions, if I may, Chairman. I have tried to look through this whilst you've been speaking, but I couldn't see any reference to it. For incidents that occur on the A1, I appreciate the A1 weaves in and out of Lincolnshire, but that is a concern to local members in that area. But I'm just wondering, where is that data reported, and are the Lincolnshire incidents on the A1 within these figures, or are they not? And is there any data for the A1 as a whole, as a stretch of road, available? Because there are obviously some issue areas on the A1, but I don't believe those areas may sit within the Lincolnshire boundary, although very close to it. And secondly, and it's more just an observation with reporting dangerous driving to the police. I remember a number of years ago, I used to do the same commute to work every single day, and every day there was this one young motorist who was driving recklessly, dangerously. And I did try and report this motorist to the police. And I was met by the gentleman on the phone, and he just told me to fill out a form, and that was it. And it wasn't really an encouraging way to report dangerous driving. So I'm just wondering, has that improved in recent years, or is it still the case if you see a dangerous driver, you have to submit a form and send it for the police to perhaps follow it up in the future? Or are there any proactive measures being taken out to catch these regular dangerous drivers who use the same route every single day of the year, and unfortunately one day, they might not make it to work because of their driving? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. So first of all, yes, the information for the A1 within our sections of the A1 is included in the data that we presented in this report. I haven't added the A1 specifically as a road, but we can very easily provide you with up-to-date information for the number of collisions that have occurred in Lincolnshire on the A1, and we can go down to whatever level of detail might be beneficial. So types of vehicles involved, types of drivers involved, whether they're from the county or from outside of the county. A couple of years ago, Councillor Richard Davies led a summit in Grantham, which the Road Safety Partnership contributed significantly, which was trying to highlight some of the issues and bringing together all the organisations and various groups throughout the county and in the local regional area as well, to start looking at what types of things can be done on the A1 to try and improve the situation. And I know that is work that is ongoing. As you've highlighted, it is an issue for the county. It's something that we're aware of, and it's something that we're actively involved with. But I am more than happy to try and put together some specific information for the committee on the A1. So that you've got more information. With regard to dangerous driving, yeah, I'm really disappointed to hear the experience that you had, Councillor Dyer, and probably not alone. I would imagine others have had that as well. That's one of the reasons we've brought Operation Snap in. Now, I appreciate, of course, somebody needs to have a dash cam, but we get a lot of inputs from pedal cyclists who've outlined things that you've highlighted there. So either specific routes or specific types of vehicle that have presented problems. And what they're able to do is give us video evidence of those things occurring, and then also a witness statement that could be used should that need to move forward to court. So I think Operation Snap is a really good way for us to start bringing in dangerous and careless and inconsiderate driving offences. What you should also be expecting, I think, as a member of a public or a council or anybody else, is that, again, if you have specific information of an issue or a problem that's occurring in your community, that it's reasonable to expect a positive response from the authorities and try and help you do something about that. So where you know that something is occurring, I think these days with online submissions, it should be quite easy to provide that information, but it can also be sent to us at the Road Safety Partnership, and we'll be very happy to liaise with our neighbourhood policing team colleagues or roads policing team colleagues to try and have those vehicles targeted if necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. Steve, got two questions. On page 29, right at the bottom, it says the human cost factor has always been based on how much those relatives will be willing to pay to avoid the incident. I'm not quite sure what that means. And page 52, previously, when I've been sat on this committee, the same issues come up, and I asked for if bad street lighting was a factor. They said they would look at it, but I can't see it anywhere here. Is that a factor in these instances, or, is it not reportable for some reason? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I was hoping you was going to answer that question, because I've probably not been able to provide you with the information as I would have liked to at previous reports. But what I can say on this occasion is that the number. So just a quick qualification before I start on this is that, of course, we are reliant upon the police officer attends to submit the information into the Stats 19 form, as with anything else that goes into there. So it's only as good as that information. So I can't guarantee that on occasion something would have been missed. But what we can say is that from 2017, 18, 19 and 2020 as a group, in the hours of darkness, where there are street lights present but unlit, we only have 11 recorded incidents throughout that whole time. And I guess the next most pertinent question is, has that increased or changed since the change to policy when it comes to street lights? So what I can say is in 2020, there were 8 incidences recorded in terms of collisions. In 2019, it was 16. In 2018, it was 24. 2017, it was 27. What I would say is the most likely street light commentary that we will get on Stats 19 is daylight, street lights present will be when most collisions occurs, and the next most likely is where there's darkness with no street lighting at all, or darkness where street lights are present and lit. As recorded, darkness where there's street lights present but unlit makes up a very, very small fraction of the collision data that we have reported to us. And on your first point, we don't have any input or say into that national measure of how the cost of a collision is put into place, but of course it does involve a number of factors, including the emergency services requirements when the collision occurred, and in medical care should it be appropriate, and also the cost of somebody's contribution to society had they not died in a motor accident. So for example, if somebody is 18 years old, of course there's a good chance that they were going to contribute to society for a lot longer, so the economic impact of their passing is more in terms of monetary value than it would have been for somebody who is much older in life. But in terms of what somebody would pay, as you highlighted there, I'm afraid I've got nothing to say on that, because I don't put together the information.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you very much. And I would begin by saying, very clearly looking at the long-term trends, the Road Safety Partnership does an absolutely fantastic job in keeping people safe in Lincolnshire and travelling through Lincolnshire. I would just draw attention on page 45, figure 2, the Ksi Casualties. I'm a little worried that 2017, 18 and 19 showed a noticeable increase in KSI casualties. And I mean, obviously, we are looking at 20 and 21 in terms of lower figures. Do we have any idea why 17 and 18 and 19 saw that reversal of trend over the longer period? And whether that's something that is likely to come back now we're no longer in this sense benefiting from lockdowns. I do have another couple of bits and pieces to bring up after that, but I'll just leave that as a question for a moment, please.
Yep, thank you, Councillor. So throughout 2016, 2017, Lincolnshire Police changed the way in which Stats 19 forms were recorded. So previously it was a paper form. So the police officer would use a pen and paper and fill out all of the stats and the data, tick all of the appropriate boxes. And then we moved into electronic recording. Now, the fundamental change that occurred when we changed to electronic recording was that all of the types of injury were now pre-classified by their severity, either fatal, which would be obvious, but also serious and slights. Now, there might have been, at the time the police officer was attending previously, some uncertainty. So it might be that someone had a broken digit on their finger. And now technically, as a broken digit, that would be a serious collision. But to the officer attending, everything else about the collision and the injury at the time may seem like it's a slight injury. Whereas now, of course, that's going to be pre-classified in the right category. So I would say from 2016, mid-16, 17, our data is more accurate than it had ever been before. But what that had shown is that more of the collisions, so the overall number of collisions, including slights, was broadly similar. But the number of serious increased and the number of slights decreased. So what it meant was some of the more slight injuries were now more accurately be recorded as serious. So that's why you saw primarily the increase in the number of people killed and seriously injured from that point onwards. And so to your point, will that be a trend that continues? Well, obviously, our hope is that we're going to continue to drive collisions down. We want to see a year-on-year reduction every single year, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that it may go back towards the sort of 17 to 19 levels, but I hope not.
Thank you. The other table I draw attention to is on page 49 at figure 6, which is the age distribution graph. And it would appear from that that young adults 17 to 24 and mature adults 60 plus are either slightly reducing or holding steady. I mean, the feel from 2014 is that actually we are heading in the right direction in both of those categories, which feels to be against the public perception that it is older drivers and younger drivers that are driving collisions. Whereas actually the 20 to 59 age group, appreciating it is the largest number of people will fall into that category, but it is a category which between 2014 and 2021 is showing a continuing upward trend, which I think is to my mind a cause for concern. I would pick up rather than dropping in and out on a couple of other bits that from your presentation. I think the facility to report dangerous driving through dashcam footage and for that to lead to either prosecution or a warning letter is a really significant development. Is there any facility to upgrade the work of the community speed watch along similar lines? Because while the warning letters are really good, I've got a feeling that the enthusiasm of both the groups and the effect of the warning letters may be difficult to sustain over the longer period. However, if there was the facility to allow the evidence recorded by those groups to go forward as either prosecutions or fines in some way, then it would keep both the enthusiasm and enhance significantly the effectiveness of those groups. And again, they do a fantastic job going out in all weathers to give that extra protection to their own local community. And I think it's really important, certainly in a period where budgets are under pressure, that we harness as much as possible community enthusiasm and community commitment to protecting our roads and our towns and villages. And I would just like to know a little bit more of what package of measures are currently available to local communities that are looking perhaps to put their hand in their pocket and would be willing to fund additional road safety measures. I'm aware that we used to have the speed indicator sign, which a whole range of town and parish councils invested in over the last 5 or 10 years. And again, is a really good first stage measure for doing something which is visible and of key local benefit. I'm just wondering whether we're still doing that, whether we're still offering signs, or whether we have, or the Road Safety Partnership has looked at building on that and perhaps looking at, I mean, I know I've got parish councils in my division, one in particular, that has money burning a hole in its pocket and would quite happily pay for or make a significant contribution towards the cost of a speed camera. But I'm just putting those out there. It's not something for all communities, but it is something that we may be able to harness where that facility and that resource exists. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So to the first point with regard to age, I think the 17 to 24-year-old drivers and the mature drivers were probably the most impacted by COVID and were probably the least likely to be out and about as much as they might have otherwise been, and that may well have had a contribution to the reduction that we'd seen. But also because they are vulnerable road users in terms of how we categorise them, because we do a lot of work trying to target them, we will also, of course, hopefully see reductions in those areas going forward as we try and make sure that from an educational point of view, people are as aware of the requirements for safety as is absolutely necessary. But I think a short-term reduction in those two areas is incredibly positive, but probably somewhat COVID related, and it's very difficult for me to be sure, but that's my best guess and assumption. In terms of the community speed watch, I think the point that you raised, the overall point about making sure that the community speed watch groups feel valid and feel enthusiastic and feel supported is hugely important. I think the work that they do is phenomenal. It's really important to making material difference on the roads and ensuring that people drive more safely and more slowly. With regard to taking that another level and it becoming effectively enforcement, I don't want to prejudge anything too much. I'll give my own personal thoughts now without a great deal of evidence to it. But what I would say is I know other areas of the country, and a limited number, are exploring this more widely, and we will be paying attention to that. We'll be looking at the results of their work and seeing what impact it has. My initial assessment is that I am not in favour at this point in time. Now, the reason I say that is that we do an awful lot of work to ensure that accuracy and integrity is vital to enforcement actions going forward. So if you consider that the primary means of enforcement is a police officer witnessing an offence occurring and taking direct action, the use of static and average and mobile speed cameras and police staff with the appropriate powers doing that work as an alternative to the officer is the next step. And when we do that, we ensure that we are using calibrated equipment. We're ensuring that equipment is checked on a daily basis before enforcement actions are occurring. We're ensuring that those officers that are undertaking the work are highly trained and highly competent at judging the speed of vehicles and ensuring that the accuracy of the data is correct. And so also, of course, they're safety trained. They're in a situation where they're in vehicles operating safely, and so that when inevitably, as it does, I'm afraid, abuse occurs and dissatisfied motorists come to their attention, that they are safe and able to not get themselves into trouble. All of those things would be much more difficult for us to control, and to have a degree of certainty that the information that we're presenting, which could lead to points on someone's license or theoretically going to court for totting up and losing their license, I think that's where the risks are, and that's where I have my concerns at this point in time. So whilst I'm not dismissing it entirely, I would say I have concerns about it at this time, and we need to look at the experiences of others as they go through the early stages and see how it works and what challenges it might present to us. With regards to paying, I have a similar thought process when it comes to communities paying for speed cameras. We use the Department for Transport 0107 guidance document, which has a criteria for implementing speed cameras, and in that the reason that we use them is to reduce death and injury at locations where speeding has been occurring. So every single one of the sites that we have in this county at this point in time has met that criteria, and we have never said you can't have a speed camera where it's met that criteria. So I don't think finances have limited what we can do to this stage. I'm unclear if the benefits are going to be the same if a community, for example, might have had no collisions whatsoever, can then pay for a camera in theirs, but another community cannot because they don't have the money. Again, I think it's another area where I believe the way in which we do it at the moment is very well balanced. It ensures that our enforcement actions are targeted, it's proportionate, and we're making sure that we protect the communities where we have seen collisions occurring in the past. However, I recognise that might be something else we need to explore in the future if we're looking to have even greater impact. In terms of other areas, yes, of course, in terms of community speed watch, they can still buy the passive signs, they can still buy the speed indicator devices, and I know through the highway side, which is not what I control directly, there might be other areas that they can look to funds in, such as entrance gateways and speed indicator devices, or enhanced signing at the start of the village. So there are some things that are occurring, but in terms of the partnership to what we can provide for funding, it's probably not a great deal different to the last time that we spoke on it.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to prolong this meeting, but it's going to be a statement rather than a question, and it echoes really the very first comment from, I think it was Councillor Clark behind me, about the cost of a fatality. I'm on a personal mission to get a reduction in the speed limit, and anyone who's involved with this particular road or this area will hear from me many, many more times. I think it was before I was on the county council, but probably whilst I was on the borough council, but a child, an 11-year-old, was killed crossing a road, then a relatively, a fast road. It still is a fast road, and the parents were told, and he was crossing quite responsibly, no, nothing will be done, not enough people have been killed. I cannot forgive LCC for making that comment to the parents of a child that had just lost. We have to value human life as a council. That's the end of my statement.
Thank you, Councillor. Your primary point, which is valuing human life, myself, all of the staff here, clearly we are dedicating our careers to try and ensure that we reduce the number of people killed and injured on the road. So without exception, I agree with the statement that you have made. I think we need to do absolutely everything that we possibly can to ensure that we are reducing risk through the different activities that we do. So we need to try and make sure that the road space is as safe as it possibly can be, reducing the likelihood of collisions occurring because the road is as safe as it can be, but also building in measures that allow people some forgiveness should a collision occur. And what I mean by that is that, we can we can try to make the road space safer, so that should someone make a poor decision or should an error occur, that the cost of that occurring is less, so that the type of injury is reduced in its severity. So I think that's really important. I think it's also vital that we continue to ensure our educational services help to try and warn people about the dangers that they might otherwise not be aware of, but also change attitudes as well to ensure that they are trying to be as safe as they possibly can be. Some of that is about education as you are growing up, whether that be in schools, colleges, etc., new drivers, but also it's about re-educating people that have committed offences. So the types of behaviour that increases risk and trying to ensure that they become more safe. And I also think that when all of those things haven't occurred, enforcement is a fundamental part of it as well, and that where people then continue, having had all those things done before, to take those risks and to commit offences, that there's a significant chance that they are likely to get caught for it, because ultimately for some people, unless they think they're going to get caught, they're probably not going to change their behaviours. So they're all the types of activities that we need to do so that we can reduce the number of people killed and seriously injured on the roads. In terms of that, the statement that was made there, I don't want to wish to comment on the individual statement itself, but what I would say is, having said everything that I've said there, we do have to ensure that we are targeting our resources as effectively as we possibly can. Our road network is one of the largest in the UK, so there are a lot of opportunities for collisions to occur, and so that we need to use data as best we possibly can, but we also need to be conscious of those risks as they're reported to us by members of the public, because they are the people who are living in those communities and see it day in, day out. So we need to ensure that that information is brought in and useful and used to make a difference as well.
Thank you. Yes, I am making sure it's followed up. It's the A16, by the way.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. Two quick questions, and I'll try and tie them together if I can do. On 3.13, it says the highest contributing factor is careless, reckless, and in a hurry. Do you have the percentage of what that is? And on page 40, the table of projected income and expenditure, from what I can tell, the people that are breaking the law are funding the education, and there's a slight underspend. I think that's a fantastic way of doing this, and I wonder, with the underspend, is it possible to have massive signs that say the highest contributing factor for fatal collisions is careless, reckless, and in a hurry? Because if I saw one of those, it would certainly make me think twice before increasing my speed.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have the percentage. I mean, my maths is going to be challenged here, but it's that was listed as a contributory factor in 15 of the 40 fatalities that occurred in 2021. So I won't make a fool of myself by trying to do it under pressure, but it's certainly a relatively high number when compared to the fact that there was only 40 collisions. And I think what this points to, not only that first one, but most of them as you go down the list, is that people often don't intend to leave the house as set out. And to get themselves in a collision, to present a danger. They're going to try and drive safely, you would like to hope, most of the time. Those that don't, then that's where that enforcement action needs to occur. But what we can see is that some form of driver error, either intentional or unintentional, is contributing significantly to fatal and serious collisions occurring. And so that's where our challenge comes in. And it's how do you educate people and make sure that those attitudes and beliefs are changed. So those who are doing it intentionally, doing dangerous driving, risky driving, are prevented from doing that in the future, but also those that are unaware. So as I've highlighted before, sometimes just a slight increase in speed, especially on roads where people believe that they know them well. How do you change those behaviours so that people understand and recognise the risk of doing that, so that it stops something happening in the future? So those things are really important. Yet the finances for the Road Safety Partnership are broadly similar this year as they have been for the last couple of years. We do try and ensure that if there is a surplus, that information it's all ring fenced into the Road Safety Partnership, so it can't be used on other areas or activities within the council or within the police. That's a core tenet of being able to deliver the educational courses that we do, but we do make sure that it's all road safety related. You probably see the the fatal signs that we have on the sides of the roads at the moment, which gives an update year on year from the number that had occurred, which is aimed at highlighting to people that people are still losing their lives on the county's roads far too often. We also do other types of signs. So we've got the community speed watch signs, and we do the shiny side up motorcycle signs. There is a risk that you can have too many types, and then there becomes an issue with sort of clusters of signing being on there. So whether we would look to introduce any more at the moment, I'm not sure. But what I think would be really important is when we look at reviewing the fatality signs that we currently have, we have added extra message to those in the past. And I think highlighting the contributory factors is a really interesting idea that we can explore for that going forwards.
Yeah, thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I move that we endorse the report and that we are satisfied with the level of assurance provided by officers, and request that our comments from the debate are taken under consideration by officers making further changes. Does anyone dissent? Please indicate now. No, thank you, that is agreed. Moving on to item 8, highways, gully cleansing, drainage repair schemes and surface water flooding. This item is on pages 71 to 74 of the agenda pack and sets out the reactive, cyclic and planned aspects of highways drainage maintenance, including low-level flooding, the low-level flooding response. The item will be presented by Richard Fenwick, County Highways Manager, via Teams. In terms of our actions as a committee, we are invited to consider and comment the detail contained in the report and to recommend any further changes or actions. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. I will try and keep this brief rather than sort of read through the whole report for you. So I'll summarise the contents as I go through, and then obviously happen to answer any questions at the end. Starting with drainage cleansing, obviously this is an update report that we come back regularly with, so Sean and I often deliver it together. Unfortunately, Sean's unavailable today, but we give an update on the different aspects of all of our drainage asset works. In terms of the cyclic cleanse, as we've said previously, there's 190,000 highway drainage assets, which are gullies, catch pits and offlet curbs around Lincolnshire. To date, at the time this report was written, so given that we're completing hundreds of those assets per day, it will have gone up since then, but 135,000 have been cleaned. 12,500 of those have various types of defects which require follow-up works, which the local highways team then arrange off programme. 3,500 have damaged ironwork, which require a follow-up from either our network resilience team. If there's an emergency situation, that tends to be if there's actually grates missing or partial cracks or bars missing from a gully. And the remaining assets are planned to be cleansed over the coming month. We also have 12,000 assets that require specialist traffic management. So that's, for example, where there might be lane closures or next to a network rail level crossing, or on a roundabout where the teams that do the cyclic works can't just go in there in the middle of the day and cause traffic chaos. So they're often planned overnight or when there's existing network rail closures, for example. Moving on to customer transactions, I previously have given a report about some of the improvements that we're continuously trying to make to the Fix My Street and customer service centre reporting. One of the key ones that I wanted to point out was at point 2 under customer transactions. We have realised, and from good feedback from some of our county councillors as well and members of the public, which we encourage to keep coming when things don't quite work as we'd expect. When our off-programme jetting crews are sent to some of those defects that come up on the cycle, where it hasn't been possible to clean it and get it running straight away, when they mark their job on the system as complete, it sends a message of works are complete to the member of the public. Unfortunately, sometimes even the off-programme jetting can't solve the problem, and therefore it sends a confusing message to the public. So we're changing that so that it sort of sends a holding response to say that we've attended, but further works are required. So you'll start to see those messaging coming out on some of the off-programme jetting that requires even larger investigation and potentially civils works. I think a key point to point out under the minor drainage improvements section of the report is that the funding for 21-22 was increased from 300,000 to 600,000 pounds for minor drainage improvements. So that's small scheme works that typically take less than a week to complete. Let's say this isn't huge schemes. It's sort of in between the local highways reactive response and some of the larger works that Technical Services Partnership would do as detailed schemes. And we've just included that includes replacing sections of damaged highway pipes, installing additional gullies and manholes where ponding occurs, increasing the size and capacity of the drainage system over small lengths, and possibly repairing bank or ditch slips. We've had several drainage gangs working throughout the year, and the programme of that £600,000 is expected to be spending the full allocation this financial year by the end of March. Just to touch on the minor works gangs, which are something that we introduced during 2020 as part of the community maintenance scheme, which we've since realised the value of that works and kept on. A local subcontractor, AJET, has been doing the majority of that type of works for the local highways teams. Since April 2020, they've actually dealt with 365 individual sites, and our local highways teams have got a further 144 sites that are designed and scheduled for the rest of this year already. We've definitely seen the benefit of that, and from the April onwards, we are actually expanding the resource with some further subcontract to replicate that, because it's been really valuable in terms of the gap between the off-programme jetting and cyclic works and taking it to a full scheme to resolve some flooding and drainage issues out there on the network. In terms of the larger schemes that I mentioned, the development drainage funding was approved in 2020/21. That was £2.2 million. Just wanted to highlight that we've programmed schemes to the value of £1.4 million on various minor drainage schemes across the county from that £2 million allocation, with the remaining budget planned to be spent in early 2022. So we're getting through those larger and more complex schemes now. And the operational asset management teams and local highways teams are working really closely with Lincolnshire's floods and water team, and also the Technical Services Partnership, to be a lot more joined up about all of the various sources of funding that we have to really target our drainage asset works where it's of the most value to the public. I just wanted to point out that under the section around flooding response data and section 19 investigations, that, as I touched on, continues to be a really valuable part of working with the floods and water team, so that we can tie our section 19 investigations to work that is reported on a local level, and not necessarily where water has been a risk to life or internal property and warranting a section 19 investigation. They're now collecting data from us for near misses. And likewise, we're using some of the teams like AJET and other subcontractors that are doing that minor works, drainage investigation and minor repairs to effect repairs to the highways drainage asset before the section 19 investigation is even completed. I've included some data around the public inquiries that we've got that ties to that Fix My Street report. In 22 so far, we've only received 284 drainage reports and 33 flooding reports for the whole of the county of Lincolnshire, which is very low for this time of year compared with previous years. Further to this report being drafted, I actually looked this morning on the number of flooding reports that we got after the storms recently. I know they were predominantly wind related, but there was some fairly heavy rain in there, and there were actually only 16 flooding reports that came in the week after those storms. That's obviously 16 too many from my point of view, but it does start to suggest that a lot of the work that we've been doing over the past couple of years is starting to have an effect. Obviously, you can't plan for the weather, and we haven't had as wet a winter as we have had in some previous winters. But I think it's nice to see that there is some sort of diminishing public reporting from especially some of the more severe drainage and flooding incidents, and that will hopefully come down as those hundreds of schemes that we've got planned for the rest of the year on a minor level address some of those recurring and frustrating issues around where it's not just a blocked gully. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the report, but conscious of time, I think that probably highlights the key aspects, and happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, just a question, please, for Richard. You speak about the 12,000 assets requiring specialist traffic management, and I'm wondering if this includes the gullies along a lot of the bypasses, because I'm thinking particularly the A17 where it goes past Swineshead, Wigtoft on towards Fosdyke. There's a lot of water standing on the sides of the road during heavy rain, and it does well, I know a lot of those channels, gullies are blocked, and I'm just wondering how regularly they get cleaned, and whether it's because the situation on a busy A road and on these bypasses. I mean, these gullies, I think, are linked into the drainage ditches along the side of these roads, which they were also put in with the roads. I wonder if Richard had got a comment on that, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Brooks. Yes, they will in general be part of that programme. Most of our A roads require specialist traffic management because often these cyclic works are done under stop and go boards, which might not be appropriate for roads with that amount of traffic. So they'll need to be done either overnight or with lights. I don't think that we would be putting lights up on the A17 during the day unless we could really avoid it. So they will be night works. I'd also point out that we do have some ditch clearance works for highway ditches. Not that we have that many highway ditches. Most ditches are riparian ownership, but a lot of the ones at the side of the A roads, like the A17, where you mention, are highways ditches. And we have some ditch clearance works starting imminently, actually, which will tie into those programmes. And another thing that we're trying to do is liaise closer with our district council colleagues, just to make sure that a good example is around the Louth bypass, where there's sometimes loads from hay and straw off lorries does tend to block the gullies on those main A roads, and they might need more regular sweeping. In the past, we had looked at trying to do a targeted cleanse for our gullies before going back to the annual cycle. Previously, the data that we had wasn't really that reassuring, and it was hard to compare. But since the new Balfour Beatty contract in 2020, we've got some really, really good data now back from the cyclic cleanse that goes on, and the way that they work with recording every single individual asset through the Confirm system might allow us to now start developing a targeted cleanse where some of those gullies are done more than once a year. And then likewise, there's some gullies in some areas that don't really need to be cleaned even every year, because they are self-cleansing effectively and could be done every couple of years or every 3 years without any really adverse effects. Hopefully that does answer the question.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Brooks?
Yeah, it does appear to me that the gullies on these A roads, they do get blocked up fairly quickly for the reasons that you've just outlined, and they possibly do need doing more than once a year, because the amount of standing water that you see on the side of these roads, and I'm sure it is due to block gullies. I'm sure it just gives me the impression that they should be either cleaned out more regularly, or begs the question, do they get done once a year? I suppose that's the point I'm making. Do they get done once a year?
Yes, thank you. To come back on that, yes, they do get done once a year now. There was a period where that wasn't the case due to the allocation of funding and our highways infrastructure asset management plan at the time, but there is now at least an annual cleanse of every gully in the county. There's obviously a slight discrepancy between I've only just recently moved into the post, as Karen announced, of Head of Highways Asset and Local Management Services. When I wrote the report with Sean, I was the County Highways Manager, but I am keen in my new role. One of the things that I do want to try and deliver is a targeted cleanse of gullies and adopt our policies to do that if possible. So that will be a focus for me going forward. And I agree that some of these A roads are likely to be the ones where data would suggest that they might need more than once a year to be cleaned.
Thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I move that we endorse the report, that we are satisfied with the update that has been provided, and request that our comments from the debate are taken under consideration by officers making further changes. Does anyone dissent? If so, please indicate now. No, thank you, that is agreed. Moving on to item 9, the committee work programme. This item is on pages 75 to 79 of the agenda pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the content of our work programme. The report will be presented by Chiara, our scrutiny officer. The actions are to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. Over to you, Chiara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And good morning to everyone present. My name is Ksi Casualties and I'm the designated scrutiny officer for this committee. The purpose of this standing agenda item is to give you a quick forecast and a flavour of what is to be anticipated in the coming months, as to enable you to consider and comment on the content and scrutiny activity programme throughout the year to ensure that it still remains focused exactly where it can be of greatest benefit. You're welcome to highlight any additional topics that you would like to see included or for consideration in the work programme for the next year, 2022-2023, which is now being developed. I would like to turn your attention on this occasion on the next meeting on the 25th of April. There is one pre-decision item to be taken, which is process for the adoption of private streets, and it will be brought to this committee by Liz Burnley. We have a standing agenda item, which is the Highways Q3 performance indicators, which will be brought back by heads of services. And we also have the street lighting policy updates that will be brought back to us in line with previous requests by this committee membership. I would just like to also make a note that there's a slight typo on the table. There is an item 4, which is missing a title there. This is due to the item that previously was there, which was the bikeability report, a pre-decision item. It is now removed from the business for this committee due to the collapsing time frame between now and the decision time frame within which the decision needs to be taken. So, therefore, without any further comments, this report will be going to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board on the 24th of March. And this concludes my update to you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chiara. Do we have any questions? Councillor Austin.
I've been lobbied, and I think Councillor Brooks has as well, on a matter of the roundabout advertising, and I wonder if it would be possible for us to have a review of as we had a working group on advertising on roundabouts 3 years ago, 4 years ago, not quite sure now, and I wondered if it'd be possible to have a review of the impact that, the effect of this, and I also have a concern, ought we to be considering the cost of fuel, or maybe this isn't the right committee for that, because with the cost of fuel going up, the amount of fuel that we are using as with our, with travel, well, ought we to be reducing it? But on the other hand, I appreciate that this probably is not the right committee. However, what is the right committee is for me to comment that if this had been, say, a factory, I think we would have been walked out. because of the temperature. How many of us have gone and put our coats on today? Quite a lot of us, haven't we? Including the chairman. And the windows are open. Is the heating on? Because if so, we're wasting fuel, aren't we? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Yes, I'm happy to take back those two topics for consideration. And in terms of the heating issue in the chambers, we're still keeping the windows open to make sure that we get fresh air in the room, because we may be at the end, hopefully, of this pandemic. However, we're still trying to maintain some measures of protection. But yes, I will carry those comments. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. Seeing as I raised it earlier today, could we have an item on the progress of the travelling in Lincoln, or the non-update on it? You know, basically, what's happening with the traffic in Lincoln?
Okay, yeah, any further Councillor Austin, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciating that I'm an itinerant here, and I may, if you covered this previously or recently, please ignore me. But I was just wondering whether it would be useful to have a update on how we're getting on spending the levelling up funding and the progress of how that's going to translate into highways improvements where necessary in Lincolnshire, please.
Any further questions? No, so I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 75 to 79 and the additional issues highlighted in the discussion today. Does anyone dissent? If so, please indicate now. No, thank you, that is agreed. That now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you.